Hey there, welcome to Whispering Tales. If you're here right now, chances are your day was long, your mind is busy, and you're just looking for a little peace. So, close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath in, and let it out. You're safe now. You're in a space made just for you. A world of dreams is waiting. And tonight, we're traveling into two magical tales, full of forests, wonder, and quiet enchantment. We'll begin with Hansel and Gretel, two children lost in the woods, whose courage will guide us through moonlit trees and sugar-coated secrets. Then, we'll drift into the timeless tale of Sleeping Beauty, where true rest lies behind a single touch. Are you ready? Let's begin. Once upon a time, in a small, quiet village on the edge of a deep, whispering forest, there lived a poor woodcutter, his two children, and their stepmother. The little boy was named Hansel, and the girl was Gretel. Their home was small and humble, made of old, worn-out wood, with a crooked chimney that puffed a gentle plume of smoke into the sky. The floorboards creaked under their feet, and the roof was patched with pieces of leftover shingles. But despite the cramped space, despite the chill of winter and the lean seasons, there was a warmth that lived inside. The warmth of love, the bond between the children and their father, a bond that no amount of hunger or hardship could ever break. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, the wind outside began to howl, louder and colder. The fire in their little stove flickered weakly, casting long shadows on the walls. The smell of burnt wood filled the air, but it did little to warm the room. The table was empty, except for a few crumbs and some dried herbs. There was barely any bread left, and the grown-ups whispered to each other, speaking in hushed tones, thinking the children were already asleep. But Hansel and Gretel were not asleep. They lay wide-eyed in their straw beds, their minds racing. They had heard the whispers. They knew something was coming. Tomorrow something would change. The world outside would shift. They could feel it in the air, a coldness, a sense of uncertainty. They were already preparing themselves for the worst. The next morning, as the sun struggled to peek through the thick clouds, their stepmother's voice broke the silence. She called from the kitchen, her voice smooth and calm, but her eyes gleamed with something unreadable. "We're going for a walk today, a very long walk in the forest." Gretel squeezed Hansel's hand tightly. She could feel the tension in the air. And Hansel, clever Hansel, the quiet, quick-thinking boy, slipped outside for just a moment before they set off. He filled his pockets with small white pebbles, each one glittering faintly in the early morning light. He had a plan to keep them safe. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the trees towered above them like silent giants, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. The birds sang softly from the treetops, the leaves rustling in a rhythmic whisper. Felt peaceful, but there was an unsettling feeling, an uncertainty in the air, like something wasn't quite right. The deeper they walked, the quieter the forest became. It was as if the trees themselves were watching, waiting, holding their breath. And then, when they reached a tall oak tree in the middle of the forest, their stepmother suddenly stopped. She turned to them, her eyes narrow, lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Stay here," she said in a voice that sounded far too sweet. "I'll be back soon." Hansel, never one to be easily fooled, whispered to Gretel, "Don't worry, I left a trail behind us. We'll find our way home." He was calm, but his heart raced as he watched their stepmother disappear into the trees. Gretel squeezed his hand even tighter, but Hansel just smiled softly, knowing that he had a plan. He had left a trail of white pebbles, tiny, shining stones that would lead them back to safety. And so, they waited for the night to fall, for the moon to rise, and the stars to guide them. But when night finally came, the pebbles were gone. The next morning, there were no shining white stones, only crumbs, breadcrumbs scattered across the forest floor. And the birds, they were hungry. Hansel and Gretel were lost, truly lost. The forest seemed to grow darker, more menacing with every step they took. Their feet were sore from walking, their legs heavy with exhaustion. The trees pressed in around them, blocking out the light. It felt as though the forest was closing in on them, making it impossible to find their way. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, they saw it. A house, but this house wasn't made of wood or stone. It was made of candy, sugar windows, cookie walls, and a roof made of chocolate and jelly drops. The whole house shimmered in the moonlight, a sweet and inviting sight. Gretel gasped in wonder, her eyes wide with disbelief. Hansel's heart skipped a beat. Could it really be? Could they have found something that would save them? They rushed forward, hands outstretched, ready to touch this magical house, this dream of sweetness and comfort. And when they reached the door, creaked open, all by itself. Inside, they were met with the warmest, sweetest welcome. An old woman stood there, smiling kindly. Her back was hunched, and her eyes were cloudy, but she had a voice that sounded so sweet, almost too sweet. "Oh, my dears," she cooed, "you must be so hungry. Come in, come in. Taste the treats, taste everything." The children stepped inside, their minds still racing, but their stomachs leading them forward. Marshmallow chairs, gingerbread tables, and lollipop handles on every door. It was like a dream, a sugary, cozy dream. But even in this sweet dream, something felt wrong. There was a strange chill in the air, a subtle unease that the children couldn't shake. And that night, as Gretel slept soundly on a bed of soft cake and whipped cream, Hansel couldn't sleep. The house was too quiet. And then he heard it, a creak, a soft step, then another. And there, standing at the foot of his bed, was the old woman. Her smile was no longer kind. It was wider now, too wide. Her eyes gleamed in the dark. Hansel felt a shiver run down his spine. He knew now. The house, the treats, the warmth, it was all a trap. This woman, this sweet old lady, was no lady at all. She was a witch, and she had a plan for them. A dark, terrible plan. The next morning, as the first light of dawn began to filter through the candy-covered windows, the witch began her work. She didn't wake the children with kind words or gentle nudges. No, she stood in the doorway of the room, her crooked back bent, her eyes gleaming with a wicked hunger. She spoke in a voice that was sweet, but held something dark beneath it, like honey laced with poison. "You're safe here, my dears," she said, her lips curling into a smile. "But you're not quite as safe as you think." Hansel and Gretel had already begun to understand the truth. The house made of sweets was a prison, the kindness a lie. But the witch's intentions were still unclear until she showed them. She turned to Hansel, her voice sugary and thick with malice. "Hansel, my dear," she said, "you look too thin. It's time for you to get nice and plump. You'll taste so much better, you see. She locked Hansel in a cage. Not just any cage, mind you. This cage was made of sticky licorice, the kind that clung to your skin and made it impossible to move. Hansel tried to pull himself free, but the candy was too strong, too sweet, and too sticky. He rattled the bars in frustration, but the witch only chuckled. "You're safe, dear boy, safe in my cage. I'll feed you well soon enough. But first," she turned to Gretel, her eyes narrowing. "First, I need you to make something to eat. You see, you'll be helping me cook today." Gretel stood frozen for a moment, her heart racing in her chest. But there was something inside her that wouldn't let her give up. She knew she had to help her brother. She knew she had to escape this dreadful place. Days passed, maybe even weeks. It was hard to tell in the strange, candy-filled world of the witch's home. Hansel's bones ached, his stomach growled, and Gretel's spirit began to wither beneath the witch's watchful eyes. Every day, the witch would approach the cage, poking and prodding Hansel, checking to see if he had gained any weight. But Hansel, clever Hansel, held a small bone in his hand. It was just a tiny bone, something he had found in the cage. But when the witch reached in to check his finger, she couldn't tell the difference between the bone and his thin, scrawny hand. "Still too thin," she would grumble, peering at him through her cloudy eyes. "I'll give you another day." Gretel, though she was terrified, would sneak glances at her brother when the witch wasn't watching. She saw the bone in Hansel's hand and understood immediately. Her heart swelled with both fear and hope. She had to do something. She couldn't just let them both stay in this awful place, trapped by the witch's lies and hunger. Then, one day, the witch grew impatient. "Enough of this," she cried, her voice high and shrill. "Today is the day, Hansel. Whether you're fat or thin, you're going to be dinner." Hansel's heart skipped a beat. The time had come. The witch turned to Gretel, her sharp eyes gleaming. "Get the oven ready," she ordered. "I need it nice and hot, hot enough to cook a boy." Gretel's legs shook beneath her, but she held her ground. She couldn't let Hansel be cooked alive, not after everything they had been through. With all the strength she could muster, she turned to the witch and asked sweetly, "Could you show me how to use the oven first? I've never used one before. I'm just a little girl, you see." The witch laughed, a cackling sound that echoed through the candy-filled house. "Foolish child," she said. "I'll show you." The witch bent down, leaned close to the oven to adjust the fire, her face inches away from the open door. And in that moment, Gretel acted. With every ounce of strength in her small body, she pushed the witch with all her might. The witch fell, stumbling backward, her wide, wicked smile frozen in shock as she tumbled toward the oven. The door slammed shut with a deafening bang. The witch was gone, her evil plan extinguished. For a moment, there was silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. Gretel stood in the center of the room, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She couldn't believe what had just happened. But the fear in her chest began to ease as the weight of the situation settled in. She had done it. She had saved her brother. She had saved herself. Hansel, who had been locked in the cage, heard the sound of the door closing, and his heart leaped. He shook the bars one more time, and this time they opened. The cage door fell away like paper in the wind. He rushed out, running to Gretel, who was standing near the oven, her eyes wide and full of shock. The witch was gone, and they were free. They embraced, the weight of their ordeal finally lifting from their shoulders. But there was no time to waste. They needed to leave the witch's house behind, forever. As they explored the house, they found something they hadn't expected. A room full of treasure, gold coins, sparkling jewels, and precious stones. Hansel and Gretel filled their pockets with as much as they could carry, their hearts filled with hope and gratitude. They could hardly believe their luck. After all the suffering, the hunger, and the fear, they had found something that would change their lives forever. And so, with pockets full of treasure and hearts full of courage, they made their way out of the forest. The journey back was long and weary, but it was filled with light. The weight of the witch's house, of her trap, was gone. When they finally reached their village, their father was waiting for them. He wept with joy when he saw them, his children safe in his arms once more. Their stepmother was gone. No one knew where she had gone, or if she would ever return. But the little wooden house, once cold and empty, now felt warm again. The fire crackled in the stove. The smell of fresh bread filled the air. And from that day on, Hansel and Gretel were never hungry again. They were never afraid again, for together they had defeated the darkness of the forest. Together they could face anything. With the treasure in their pockets and hearts full of relief, Hansel and Gretel walked hand in hand through the forest. They didn't know what awaited them beyond the trees, but one thing was clear. They had each other, and together, they could overcome anything. The path back home was different from the one they had taken before. This time, the trees seemed to whisper a little more softly, the wind a little gentler. The forest, once dark and foreboding, now seemed to hum with a quiet understanding, as if it knew the children had triumphed. And with each step, the feeling of their old home, that small cottage on the edge of the woods, grew closer. The sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of purple and orange. The quiet of the evening wrapped around them like a blanket, and they felt an overwhelming peace settle over them. As they approached the edge of the forest, they could see the familiar outline of their cottage. The crooked chimney, the old wooden walls, it was all still there. But something was different now. The cottage looked brighter. Warmth seemed to pour out of the windows, and there, standing in the doorway, was their father. His face was filled with tears, but they were not tears of sadness. No, these were tears of joy, of relief. He had been waiting for them, longing for their return, never once giving up hope. "Father!" Gretel cried out, running toward him. Hansel followed closely behind, both children eager to be enveloped in the safety and love of their father's arms. The father bent down and scooped them both up into a tight embrace, holding them as if he could never let go. His voice was thick with emotion as he whispered, "I thought I had lost you. I didn't know what had happened, where you had gone. But now I have you back." For a moment, the world outside seemed to fade away. The sounds of the forest, the worries about food, the darkness that had haunted their home, all of it was gone. In its place was a family reunited, a bond stronger than anything the world could throw at them. The children told their father everything, about the witch, about the house made of candy, about the treasure they had found. Their father listened in awe, disbelief at first, but then a deep, grateful understanding washed over him. He didn't ask any questions about the riches they had brought back. He didn't need to. What mattered now was that his children were safe and that they were together again. They had endured so much, and yet here they were, stronger than before. As the days passed, Hansel, Gretel, and their father settled back into their lives. Their tiny cottage was filled with laughter once again. The fire in the stove burned brighter. The bread on the table was always plentiful, and every corner of the house felt warm, full of life. But the memory of the forest, the witch, and the journey they had gone through never truly left them. It had become a part of who they were. They had faced unimaginable challenges, but they had done it together. And that made all the difference. One evening, as the stars began to twinkle above, Gretel and Hansel sat on the front porch of their cottage, looking up at the night sky. It was peaceful now, the kind of peace that only comes after a long struggle. "I'm glad we're home," Hansel said quietly, his voice full of contentment. "Me too," Gretel replied, her eyes soft as she gazed at the stars. "But I'll never forget what we went through. The witch, the forest, everything changed me." Hansel nodded. "Me too. But I know one thing for sure. We'll always have each other, no matter what." And with that, they sat in comfortable silence, the warmth of their father's love surrounding them, and the quiet safety of their home wrapping them in its embrace. As they gazed at the stars, they knew that the darkness of the forest would never be able to take away the light that now shone within them. They had faced the unimaginable, and they had triumphed. Together, the night grew darker, but there was no more fear in their hearts. The horrors of the forest were far behind them now. The safety of their little cottage, surrounded by the protection of their family, was all they needed. The forest would always be there, but so would their courage, their love, and the lessons they had learned. And that, dear friend, is the tale of Hansel and Gretel, the two brave children who, against all odds, found their way back home, stronger and braver than ever. Hey there, if you're here right now, chances are your day was long, your mind is busy, and you're just looking for a little peace. So, close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath in, and let it out. You're safe now. You're in a space made just for you. A world of dreams is waiting. And tonight, we're traveling into two magical tales, full of forests, wonder, and quiet enchantment. We've already wandered through the woods with Hansel and Gretel, but now it's time to drift into a different world, a world full of magic, mystery, and the promise of rest. So now, let's take a step into the timeless tale of Sleeping Beauty, where true rest lies behind a single touch. Are you ready? Let's begin. Once upon a time, in a land surrounded by rolling hills and vast, green meadows, there was a kingdom. This kingdom, though peaceful on the outside, held a secret, a mystery that would change the lives of many. The king and queen, who ruled the land with kindness and wisdom, had long desired a child. And after many years of longing, their wish was finally granted. The queen gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, who was named Aurora. Her beauty shone as bright as the morning sun, and her laughter was like the sound of birds singing in the spring. The kingdom rejoiced at the arrival of their princess, and the royal family celebrated for days. But as with many fairy tales, there was a twist. For among the guests at the grand celebration, there was one guest who had not been invited. A wicked fairy, who lived deep in the dark forest, arrived unannounced, her heart full of bitterness, and her eyes cold with envy. The fairy watched from the shadows as Aurora was presented to the court. As the fairy stepped forward, the room fell silent. With a voice that echoed through the hall, she declared, "The child shall grow to be the fairest of them all, and when she turns 16, she will prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel and fall into an endless sleep, a sleep that can never be woken." A chill ran through the crowd, and the king and queen rushed to the child's side. But it was too late. The wicked fairy's curse had been cast. The princess, still a baby, had already been doomed. Gentle pause, soft wind in the background. But before the fairy could leave, a kind and good fairy, who had been hidden in the back of the room, stepped forward. She was not as powerful as the wicked fairy, but her heart was pure. She lifted her hand and spoke softly. "The curse cannot be broken, but I can offer a gift. The princess shall indeed fall into a deep sleep when she pricks her finger. But instead of sleeping forever, she will sleep until a prince, one who truly loves her, comes to wake her." The wicked fairy, enraged, disappeared into the shadows, and the king and queen, though still fearful, took comfort in the kind fairy's words. And so the years passed. As Aurora grew, she became more beautiful and graceful than anyone could have imagined. She had many friends in the kingdom, and people came from all corners of the land to see the princess, to hear her laugh, to witness the light that seemed to surround her wherever she went. But the curse, the dark shadow of the curse, hung over her life. The king and queen, desperate to protect their daughter, ordered that all spinning wheels in the kingdom be destroyed. They hoped to keep Aurora safe from the danger that awaited her when she turned 16. But as with all things, fate cannot be avoided forever. One crisp autumn afternoon, when Aurora was nearing her 16th birthday, she wandered away from the castle. Her heart longed for adventure, for something beyond the walls of the palace. She found herself in a part of the castle she had never explored before, an old tower hidden behind ivy and forgotten by time. As she climbed the winding staircase, a strange feeling settled in her chest. There was something about this tower, something that called to her. She pushed open a creaky door at the top of the stairs and stepped into the dim room. There, in the center of the room, was a spinning wheel. Sound cue, soft hum, the slow turning of the wheel. Aurora stepped closer, her fingers lightly brushing the wheel's edge. She had never seen one before, but there was something so strange, so magical about it. She reached out, drawn by an invisible force, and touched the spindle. In that moment, a sharp prick, and just as the curse foretold, Aurora collapsed onto the floor, her body going limp, her eyes closing slowly. As the years passed, the kingdom fell into a deep, heavy silence. The castle, once filled with laughter and joy, was now shrouded in sorrow. The king and queen had never fully recovered from the loss of their daughter, and the land itself seemed to mourn with them. But the good fairy's prophecy remained. One day, a prince, brave and true of heart, would come and awaken the princess from her slumber. And so the legend of Sleeping Beauty was born. Years turned into decades, and yet the story of the princess who slept for 100 years was told again and again. It became a tale passed down through generations, a story of hope and love, of waiting for the right moment, the right person, to bring an end to a curse. The kingdom, though quiet, never lost its belief. And deep within the forest, where the castle stood forgotten, a prince heard the tale. His heart was filled with courage and compassion, and he knew that he would be the one to find the castle. And so, he embarked on a journey through wild forests and over tall mountains, across rivers and valleys, until he finally came upon the castle that had been hidden for so long. The time had come, and as the prince approached the castle gates, the air seemed to change. It was as though the very world held its breath. For now, wait for the end of the story, and let your brain relax. Hey there, if you're still with me, that means you're sinking deeper into a world where everything is calm. Take another slow, deep breath in and let it out. You're doing wonderfully. Now, let's slip back into that enchanted castle where time has stopped. As the prince approached the castle, he felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. The air was still, as if nature itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. He walked through the overgrown gardens, where vines wrapped around old statues and wildflowers bloomed in colors so vivid they seemed to glow. Every step he took echoed softly through the silent grounds. The kingdom, though forgotten, felt alive with the magic of the princess, waiting to awaken. At last, he reached the castle doors. They opened slowly, as if inviting him inside. The prince stepped into the grand hall, his boots echoing against the stone floors. It was as though he had entered another world, a world frozen in time. The air was thick with dust, and cobwebs draped the grand chandelier that hung high above. Yet, in the center of the hall, there she was, Sleeping Beauty. Aurora lay upon a bed draped in silk and velvet. Her golden hair spread out like a halo around her. Her chest rose and fell gently, her face so peaceful it was hard to believe she had been asleep for so many years. The prince's heart swelled. He had heard the stories, of course, tales of the beautiful princess who had fallen under a curse. But seeing her now, lying so still and serene, was something different. Felt sacred. He stepped closer, his heart beating faster with each step. The room was so quiet, so still, and then he reached the side of her bed. For a moment, the prince simply stared down at her, overcome by the soft beauty of her face, the quiet grace in her stillness. He had heard of the curse, of how only true love's kiss could break the spell. But what if it wasn't enough? What if the fairy's prophecy was wrong? He hesitated for only a moment. His hand reached down, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. His fingers lingered gently on her skin, soft and warm, even after all these years. And then he bent down. His lips touched hers, ever so softly. The moment his lips met hers, a strange warmth spread through the room. The stillness of the castle seemed to breathe again. The air shifted, filled with a soft hum that could almost be felt in the prince's chest. He pulled back, uncertain for a moment, but then a deep, quiet sound began to ripple through the space. And then, just as the fairy had foretold, Aurora's eyes fluttered open. At first, she blinked, as though unsure of where she was, or even who she was. Her vision cleared, and she saw him, the prince. For a moment, there was silence. Neither of them spoke. They simply stared at each other, as though both were trying to make sense of the moment they were sharing. Was this a dream, or had she truly awakened? The prince smiled softly, and Aurora's lips parted, her voice a whisper. "Who are you?" The prince's heart fluttered. "I am the one who has come to wake you," he said gently. "The one who has come to break the curse." Aurora's eyes widened as she sat up in bed, her long golden hair falling over her shoulders. She looked around the room, then back at the prince. "The curse, it's over?" she asked, almost in disbelief. The prince nodded. "Yes, you've been asleep for many years, but now you're awake." She looked around, her eyes taking in the room, the dust, the cobwebs, the silence. And then she looked back at the prince, her heart swelling with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "Thank you," she whispered. And then, without thinking, she reached out to take his hand. As their hands met, a warmth spread through both of them, like the sun rising over a long winter. It was the warmth of life returning, of hope, of a future waiting to unfold. The castle, too, seemed to awaken. The shadows in the corners of the room lifted. The dust stirred as if the walls were breathing again. The vines that had overrun the castle's grounds began to shrink back, as if they were finally ready to let go of the past. The prince helped Aurora to her feet, and she took her first step in years. It was tentative at first, but then she felt it. The world was different now. The curse was broken. The air felt fresher, and the kingdom was alive again. And so, the prince and Aurora walked through the castle together, hand in hand. As they moved through the grand halls, the sounds of life began to return. The birds outside sang their songs once more, and the once dry fountains began to flow again. The castle, the kingdom, the very earth itself was beginning anew. And somewhere, deep within the land, the king and queen, Aurora's parents, felt the change too. The sadness they had lived with for so long lifted. They had heard nothing from the princess for so many years, but now they could feel it. Their daughter was alive, and everything was as it should be. As the princess slowly opened her eyes, the world around her seemed to glow with an ethereal light. The curse had been broken, and the centuries of slumber were now a distant memory. Aurora gazed around the room, her heart swelling with a mix of wonder and confusion. How long had she been asleep? Was it real, or was it just a dream? A whisper in the air that had lingered in her mind all these years? But when she saw him, Prince Philip, standing there, his face beaming with joy, she knew the truth. This was no dream. This was the beginning of a new chapter in her life. The curse was over, the darkness had been lifted, and the love they shared was now all that mattered. The prince gently took her hand, his touch as soft as a breeze, and led her outside. The garden, once dark and covered in thorns, had now bloomed into a vibrant world of color. The birds sang, the flowers swayed, and the air felt fresh and alive. "We are free," Aurora whispered, her voice barely audible, yet filled with all the hope in the world. Philip nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "We are free," he said again, his voice steady and full of promise. "Together, we will rebuild, we will live, and we will love. Nothing will stand in our way anymore." As they walked through the garden, hand in hand, the castle walls seemed to come alive, as though the very stones themselves rejoiced in their newfound freedom. The servants, once cursed to sleep along with the princess, slowly began to awaken as well, stretching and blinking in the light of the sun, unsure of the passage of time, but grateful for the return of life. The king and queen, long missing their daughter, could hardly believe their eyes when they saw her walking toward them. Tears of joy streamed down their faces as they embraced their daughter, their beloved Aurora, who had been lost to them for so long. The joy in the kingdom was felt by all, as people rejoiced in the return of their princess and the breaking of the curse that had cast a shadow over their lives for so many years. And as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Aurora and Philip spent their time together, learning about the world that had passed while she slept. They explored the lands, met with people from all walks of life, and filled the castle with laughter and light. They were married in a grand ceremony, a celebration that echoed through the entire kingdom. The day was filled with music and joy, and the air seemed to hum with happiness. It was as though the very earth itself had rejoiced in the union of two souls, bound together by love and fate. As they stood together, hand in hand, at the altar, surrounded by their loved ones, Aurora and Philip knew that this was only the beginning. They would face challenges, they would endure hardships, but through it all, they would have each other. Their love, which had conquered the darkest curse, would guide them through whatever came their way. And so they lived, together, happy, fulfilled. Their kingdom flourished, and the people of the land knew peace and prosperity once more. The shadow of Maleficent's curse was now just a distant memory, a story told by the fireside, a legend of the past. And in its place, there was only light, hope, and the promise of a bright future. Aurora, the once cursed princess, and Philip, the brave prince, had found their happily ever after. And their love, a love that had broken even the most powerful of curses, would endure forever. And so, dear friend, as we drift away from their world, remember that love, no matter how dark the world may seem, will always find a way to bring light. Just like Aurora and Philip, may we all find our own moments of peace, love, and rest. Take a deep breath now and let it out slowly. In this world of dreams, where anything is possible, rest easy knowing that, like the princess, we too can find our own happiness, even after the longest of nights. Good night.